Good evening, everyone. I'm honored you've chosen to join me for From Prophecy to Fulfillment, the complete road to Calvary. Throughout this series, we'll discover how God's redemptive story unfolds, one promise leading to another, across the expanse of the Old Testament and culminating in the revealing of Jesus Christ in the New Testament. Now, as we gather here, imagine the soft glow of lamplight, the hushed warmth of a close-knit congregation. I invite you to journey with me. We're entering a story that begins literally at the dawn of time. Our first stop is the book of Genesis, where we'll linger over three pivotal moments: creation, the fall, and an often overlooked treasure called the proto-evangelium, or the first announcement of the gospel. Before we launch into these passages, take a moment to consider a few questions. Why did God create humanity at all? What truly happened when Adam and Eve chose to disobey? And how did God respond in their darkest moment? By keeping these questions at the forefront, we'll see that tonight's topic isn't just ancient history. It's a mirror reflecting our own human condition. With these thoughts in mind, let's begin by gazing upon the majestic creation account. We'll see how God's perfect design laid the foundation for everything that follows. The Bible starts with a sweeping declaration. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Genesis 1:1. From this simple yet profound statement, the stage is set for a grand narrative of cosmic artistry. We read how God methodically speaks the universe into being. Light piercing darkness, land emerging from chaotic waters, and an abundance of plants, fish, birds, and animals appearing at his command. Each new creative act is pronounced good, culminating in a vibrant, harmonious world. Moving from a wide-angle view of galaxies and ecosystems, we now shift focus to the crowning achievement of God's handiwork, humanity. Genesis 1:26-27 tells us, "Let us make mankind in our image, so that they may rule over the fish in the sea and the birds in the sky." Take a moment to pause and reflect. Being made in God's image signifies we possess qualities echoing our Creator: intellect, creativity, moral responsibility, and a capacity for deep relationship. It's a concept that underscores our intrinsic worth and dignity. When you consider the beauty of a sunrise or the artistry of human expression, you're glimpsing a reflection of the Creator's brilliance within us. Having acknowledged humanity's special role, let's narrow our view even further. Genesis 2 zooms in on a particular place called Eden, a garden where Adam and Eve experienced the fullness of God's presence. In Eden, Adam tends the garden, naming animals and relishing a direct, unbroken fellowship with God. Eve is formed from Adam's side, symbolizing a relationship of mutual care and unity. Together, they walk without shame or fear, free to explore and enjoy every aspect of God's perfect creation. And yet, as we all know, perfection in a broken world seems fleeting. The warmth of Eden soon collides with a devastating choice that forever alters the landscape of human history. To understand this shift, we now turn our attention to the pivotal moment often called the fall. Genesis 3 introduces an unexpected element: temptation. Up to this point, the narrative was marked by unity, delight, and communion with God. However, we're quickly introduced to a cunning serpent, a figure the New Testament later associates with Satan. Now, imagine the scene. Early morning light filters through lush trees as Adam and Eve go about their peaceful routine. Suddenly, a persuasive voice interrupts the calm. Did God really say you must not eat from any tree in the garden? Eve, taken aback, responds, "We may eat fruit from the trees in the garden, but God did say, you must not eat fruit from the tree that is in the middle of the garden, and you must not touch it, or you will die." But the serpent persists. "You will certainly not die. God knows that when you eat from it, your eyes will be opened, and you will be like God, knowing good and evil." These words plant a subtle but poisonous seed. Is God really trustworthy? Could it be that he's withholding something vital from us? Indeed, this lie resonates throughout human history, that God's commands are restrictive rather than protective. Eve gazes at the fruit and sees it as desirable for gaining wisdom. Adam, standing beside her, remains silent yet complicit. They both eat, and in that instant, something breaks. Shame floods their hearts. They become aware of their nakedness, hastily sewing fig leaves to cover themselves. Innocence dissolves into guilt. Soon they hear God's footsteps in the garden. This time they hide, afraid of the one who had always been their greatest source of joy. "Where are you?" Adam confesses his fear, and God asks how they knew they were naked. Adam blames Eve. Eve blames the serpent. The unity that once characterized Eden is now fractured. Sin, fear, and distrust have invaded. Can you feel the tension here? How often do we, when confronted with our wrongs, shift the blame onto others or circumstance instead of taking responsibility? This universal tendency, rooted in Genesis 3, reveals just how profoundly sin distorts not only our relationship with God, but also with one another. Next, we hear God pronounce judgments on the serpent, the woman, and the man. Amid these judgments, however, we encounter a startling message of hope. Within the sorrow of Genesis 3, we find a glimmer of promise. As God addresses the serpent, he says in verses 14 to 15, "Because you have done this, cursed are you. I will put enmity between you and the woman, and between your offspring and hers. He will crush your head, and you will strike his heel." This passage may seem cryptic at first, but theologians call it the proto-evangelium, the first announcement of the gospel. Why? Because in the midst of judgment, God forecasts a day when the seed or offspring of the woman would crush the serpent's head. Evil would be dealt a decisive blow, even though this deliverer would suffer a wound in the process. From our vantage point, we see this perfectly fulfilled in Jesus Christ. At the cross, Satan strikes the heel, Jesus suffers and dies. Yet through the resurrection, Jesus emerges victorious, effectively crushing the serpent's head and neutralizing evil's power over humanity. This interplay of suffering and triumph frames the entire biblical narrative that leads us to Calvary. Reflect for a moment on how remarkable this is. Right when humanity falls, God doesn't abandon his creation. Instead, he immediately initiates a rescue mission, hinting at a future redeemer. It's a window into God's character, holy and just, yet rich in mercy and committed to restoration. If you've ever wrestled with guilt or shame, wondering if God could forgive or redeem you, remember the very first time sin entered the world, God responded by pronouncing hope. It assures us that no matter how dark our circumstances appear, God has a plan to bring light and redemption. The seeds of grace are sown in the midst of our worst failures. This seed motif reappears throughout the Old Testament, in God's covenant with Abraham, in the lineage of David, and throughout the words of the prophets. Each step in Israel's history brings us closer to recognizing who this promised Messiah will be. Now that we've explored the creation of humanity, the tragedy of the fall, and God's first promise of redemption, let's take a few moments to internalize these truths and connect them to our daily lives. Consider the following. God's design. We were created in God's image, meant for unbroken fellowship with Him. How does this truth influence the way you see yourself and others, even those you struggle to love? Human choice. Adam and Eve's disobedience wasn't about a single piece of fruit. It was about questioning God's goodness and authority. In what areas of your life are you tempted to believe that God is withholding something valuable from you? God's response. Instead of casting Adam and Eve away forever, God seeks them, asking, "Where are you?" He then clothes them more adequately. Genesis 3:21. What does this reveal about God's heart toward us, even when we sin? Each of these questions points back to the hope embedded in Genesis 3:15. A Savior will come, bridging the gap between our fallen state and God's holiness. This central promise will guide us through the rest of our journey from prophecy to fulfillment. Take comfort in the knowledge that our God is both just and merciful. When we grapple with shame, fear, or regret, we can look to this early chapter in Genesis and see that He never abandons His beloved creation. If you feel lost or distant from Him today, perhaps you can hear His gentle voice asking, "Where are you?" Not as an accusation, but as an invitation to draw near once again. What began in a place of perfect harmony quickly gave way to brokenness. Yet from the moment sin marred creation, God's words whispered redemption into the midst of pain. This blueprint for restoration is what will follow over the next several episodes, tracing how every Old Testament covenant and prophecy builds toward the ultimate fulfillment in Jesus Christ. Now that we've set the stage with creation and the fall, we'll shift in episode 2 to examine God's covenant with Abraham. We'll see how the promise of blessing for all nations arises, a promise that extends and clarifies the proto-evangelium we just discussed. As we track Abraham's journey, we'll discover the significance of faith, obedience, and the role of Abraham's lineage in making God's redemptive plan known to the world. Before I let you go, I encourage you to hold on to two key ideas from tonight: your worth and God's image. Your dignity is grounded in the fact that you bear the Creator's image. That reality remains true, even when life's challenges make you feel otherwise. Hope in the midst of failure. Adam and Eve's story reminds us how easily sin seeps in, but it also testifies to God's unrelenting commitment to rescue us. He won't leave you in darkness when you turn to Him. Thank you for sharing this sacred time with me. I pray that the truth of God's enduring love resonates within you long after we conclude. May you go forth remembering that from the very beginning, our Creator had a plan to restore what was lost. May His grace draw you closer to Him each day. And may you find courage in the knowledge that the path to Calvary begins here, with a promise that nothing, not even the serpent's bite, can overcome God's redeeming power. I look forward to exploring the covenant with Abraham in our next session. Until then, may the Lord bless you and keep you, and may His face shine upon you with everlasting peace.